get started. Yeah. Okay, so Happy New Year to everybody. I hope you all had a joyous and relaxing holiday season and a great start into 2022. I'm happy to see everyone here. And as I mentioned, this is a more informal, oops, there's more people, so sorry. I'm just letting people in as they come. So you probably all know me, but I'm going to introduce myself anyways. So I'm Uta Brady, visiting scholar at Arizona State University, and I'm also IGRI's Associate Director. And joining me today by telephone is our IGRI's co-directors by telephone, Saba Siddiki, who is an Associate Professor of Public Administration and International Affairs in the Maxwell School at Syracuse University. Hi, Saba.
Hello, everybody. Hi, everybody. I'm sorry I'm joining by phone. Our university lost power, so I wasn't able to join by internet. So I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no worries, Saba. Be safe. And then we have Christopher Frantz, who's the other co-director. Hi, Christopher. He's an associate professor in the Department of Computer Science at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. Hi, Christopher. So today we, the IGRI Directorate, right, are workshopping IG-related issues and puzzles, which basically means this is not really technically a research seminar, but kind of more intended as a roundtable discussion where you, the IGRI community, can pose your research questions and ideas for future IGRI developments. That's what it's intended. So it's actually all about you. But to get things started, I thought I'd give a quick recap of last year's developments within the IGRI, in case you're interested. So our IGRI research community grew from 67 subscribers at the beginning of the year to 270 by the end of December, which is quite a growth rate. We launched a Twitter account at the IGRI, if you're not familiar with that. It has 128 followers. That's not much, but not too bad either. We updated the IGRI website, including adding a new logo, a searchable institutional grammar library, and we updated the IG 2.0 coding guides, which are available there for download. And there's going to be a soon-to-be released book by Saba and Christopher providing more details on the IG 2.0 that you probably also want to look out for, but we'll post an announcement once that's ready and released. The IGRI YouTube website now contains video recordings of past research seminars. If you miss one, you can catch up there. We launched a research spotlight corner where we feature researchers involved in IG-related work and their research to the IGRI community. So if you know of someone who you think should be featured or you want to nominate your own research, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to feature your work there. We also formally launched a text analytics lab, which provides internship opportunities to graduate students. And Angelo is actually one of our interns there, now graduated. Congratulations, Angelo. So we currently have 7 interns. If Angelo sticks around a little bit more, we'll see. And we hosted our first annual IGRI conference virtually in June last year. And the next one will be June 20 to 22nd. And there'll be an announcement about that coming up soon. And we offered an online IG training course in August. The next one this year is going to be in April and registration will open in March. And I will make announcements through the listserv when that opens. Saba, Christopher, did I miss anything or would you like to share your thoughts before we open the floor to the audience?
I think spontaneously nothing comes to mind. Uta, you did a brilliant job. No, in fact, I'm new to some of the news as well, so it's interesting enough to hear that so much development has taken place. So quite a growth rate. No. Perhaps Saba, any intuitions, input?
No, nothing from my side. Thank you, Uta, for that very exciting and comprehensive overview.
As usual, too much detail, but hey, we wouldn't be anything without our IGRI community. So it's worth mentioning that obviously this is all a community effort. So thanks to you as well. So now to you. I mean, we're a fairly small group. Do you want to introduce yourselves, or do you want to kick off with some coding questions, or do you have any ideas, things that you want IGRI to pursue next year? So the floor is yours, IGRI community.
So far, no takers.
No?
Well, at least we recognize a few faces already from our last IGRI course. I see Asilata being here also.
Yeah.
Usually she's not as shy, but we'll learn about that throughout this entire session.
Glad to be here, but I'm here under false pretenses. I don't have questions. I just need to reconnect with the community and listen to other people's work. That's all.
Fair enough, fair enough.
You don't have to have questions, Asilata. Maybe you want to talk about things that you liked about the IGRI, or something that you want us to pursue next year, this year, sorry.
If there could be a next step, sort of an advanced course for those who have already done the workshop last year, so we could come back and take it further.
Kind of like build on what you've already learned?
Like that, yeah.
Okay.
Are there particular topics that you would want to cover in such a course, Asilata?
Not off the top of my head, but I will give it some thought and I'll get back to you.
Okay, that would be great.
Yeah, because that's always helpful.
I think we had, Juniper, please.
Juniper.
Well, go ahead, Chris.
Nothing.
Well, I can throw a few things out there. I'm Juniper Katz. I'm at the University of Massachusetts Amherst School of Public Policy. And Uta and I actually are partnering on a paper working on delta parameters within the institutional grammar. And delta parameters are a challenge to wrap one's mind around, I think. But as I understand it, just to refresh your memories, it's essentially Ostrom's way of getting at how actors assess the payoff and penalties of following norms, essentially, right? And those norms could be broadly construed. But for example, she often uses kind of a simple snatch game to describe, if you have no rules against stealing, for example, then actors are just going to steal the item that they want. Whereas in the real world, we know that actors are constrained by things like, a norm against stealing. So the norms kind of serve as an incentive for actors to engage in a negotiated process. So Uta and I are interested in this concept of delta parameters in the context of formal institutions. And we've been really struggling to make a contribution to institutional grammar because there's really not a lot of research out there about delta parameters. A couple, I would say 2 or 3 papers have taken it on head on. So I guess if, one, just generally, if any of you have thoughts about operationalizing delta parameters, I of course can share what we're attempting to do, but we would benefit from that greatly because it's a really slippery concept. If I could just say just a few more things about the idea, I think recently there's a lot of reason to believe that norms are eroding generally in society, especially in the United States and in European countries where democratic norms are under attack, right? And in fact, I was just recently reading an article about the UN's approach to Hungary, and how the existing tools for kind of bringing Hungary back into the fold are not sufficient. And one of the strategies that they're pursuing is essentially requiring that Hungary abide by the democratic norms that the UN has. So this is kind of an example of taking norms from an informal understanding that actors possess into the realm of the formal, turning them into, I guess, additional formal rules that actors have to follow. So I see examples of it all over. Greta Thunberg recently said, or Thunberg, I'm sorry if I mispronounce her name. She recently said about the climate COP26 gathering that due to the failure of nation states to agree to binding climate restrictions, that all we have left is a moral expectation of others that we do the right thing. So this concept of norms is really powerful, and especially in the natural resources and environment context. And so what Uta and I are trying to do is operationalize it at the level of the constitutive statements that are in formal rules. But it's very difficult to code those in the way that Ostrom originally conceived of them, as kind of this simple payoff. What are the payoffs and benefits and penalties of following or not following norms? So that's what we've been thinking about, what I've been thinking about a lot, and I welcome your thoughts on that. Thanks for letting me speak for so long.
May I offer
Just-
a thought, Uta? Oh,
Saba first, please go for it.
Go ahead, Saba.
oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. I can't see the Hollywood squares. So I thank you, Christopher. I'll be brief. I just well, first, I'm so glad that you both are interested in tackling this, because I think it is a really unexplored aspect of the grammar, and I'm really excited to see what you're working on. I would say that some of the most interesting and convincing operationalizations of the delta parameter concept that I've seen is work by Achim Schluter, who looked at operationalizing delta parameters, I believe, alongside the grammar within a study that looked at whether or not people comply with rules for picking tulips and tulip farms, and whether they are appropriately paying for the tulips that they are picking in these farms. And I don't believe that work was published. It was a conference presentation that I saw from Achim several years ago. I wonder if he might be willing, if you reached out to him. I know he's still responsive when I've emailed him recently about things, fairly recently. I wonder if it might be worth just emailing him and seeing if you'd be willing to share a paper, his conference paper with you, or a draft of that paper. Maybe it's ended up in publication somewhere, but in a place not as easily found or something. But that might be a helpful place. That might be a helpful lead.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Saba, for that recommendation. I will definitely reach out to him. Is that Achim? Is that how you say his name?
Well, Uta or Christopher could tell you better. But it's Achim, last name Schluter.
Juniper, I
I'll
have
leave it to the
the
German
contact.
speakers.
I have the contact information on that, Juniper. I think I've actually seen a publication on that tulip paper. That rings a bell. So I'm going to go look for that too, Juniper. Christopher, sorry.
No.
And thanks, Saba.
Brilliant, Saba. Absolutely brilliant. It's a great resource. I was just wondering. I was following your introduction on the overview of the use of the IG or the operationalization of the delta parameters, and you referenced primarily norms, and from my interpretation of the grammar, I mean, it applies to effectively any of the institution types, right? So it would also, you could also immediately basically apply it equally to rules, norms, and then perhaps attempt to seek the difference in level of commitment, or by in identifying different communities, or was that specifically targeted at identifying commitment to norms, or by obeying, or having motivations for non-compliance?
Yeah, I mean, so Uta and I have two very diverse case instances. We're doing a cross-case comparison essentially, and Uta's is in an international treaty context, and mine is in domestic conservation policy implementation. And so what I observed in the data is that when you ask, these are citizen landowners who have voluntarily protected their properties for the purpose of agriculture and environment. When you ask them, did you adopt new conservation practices? And if so, why? They often say very kind of normative things like, You know, the land trust we worked with says that it's a really good idea and I really like these people and I really want to make them happy. So I did do this thing. Or they'll say something like, it's just the right thing to do. We have to conserve resources for the future. Or it makes sense because it stops soil erosion. So what we're looking to see is if you can find those kind of normative value statements within the formal rules, right? So some laws have preambles that say, we're doing this because we care about XYZ thing. And other formal laws don't have preambles, right? And so we're kind of trying to assess what the value of value statements are in formal rules and whether you can trace those using the grammar in the actual behavior of people. And in Uta's case, like, why are actors agreeing to sign on to these treaties about whaling and other conventions related to species conservation? To kind of see the strength of the norms in the behavior, because if it's true that institutional grammar struggles a bit to generalize across instances to attach institutional features to actual outcomes and behavior, then maybe one of the X factors are the norms that are operating within those instances. But maybe I'm also expanding the concept beyond its original intent, and I could definitely be doing that.
I think this sounds like a perfect idea. Like especially the latter part, the expanding the concept beyond the original idea, because in the narrow grammar sense, I guess the norm concept is simply too narrow, right? It's a bit underpronounced, I guess. Also in the analysis that we've seen so far throughout work. So I think offering a substantive revision of the interpretation is helpful. But I just was wondering that to some extent, perhaps it could be worthwhile to differentiate, or you most likely came up with a classification of the different norms already that you actually see, right? Norms that offer, let's say, a substantive justification for complying with environmental regulation, right? Because we want to see it, be available for next generation, as opposed to a more immediate monetary payoff and so on. So, but you could also perhaps identify even norms about norms, which I find some interesting. Sometimes people have norms attached to rule or justification attached to their behavior, basically because we want to keep natural resource for the next generation. But underlying those ones can be other norms that signal why or that signal in a classical socio-normative sense, signal the social pressure that leads to the compliance behavior in the first place, because it's a value underlying the society as this particular rule is instantiated. And whereas in other societies you may have the same rule, but it would not be socially enforced, but only individually, personally enforced, right? The internal with external kind of delta discussion as well. So I think you can use it as a mechanism to stratify or propose, I don't know, a stratification of different norm classes or types as they could occur in analysis, because I find this really underpronounced, given that we have a really strong institutions and form analysis presence right now in research, but really very limited treatment of norms, and they're always treated as soft in a way. And I don't think at all that they're soft, and that's something you could put a finger on and say, hey, those guys are actually decisive for not only to offer substantive justification, but also to describe why the compliance is operates in a certain way or doesn't. So I think it's a really, really interesting area to tackle. I think I would encourage you to go beyond the grammar clearly and really explore the space more broadly, and bring it back to the grammar so the community sees it a bit. Because this has been precisely, I think Saba is listening, but has been a discourse that we had over years, because I'm coming more from a normative perspective myself, and Saba of course has the institutional lens when in our discussion. So we saw ourselves developing this kind of insight as well, that especially the normative side is a bit underpronounced. I think there's great opportunities for offering such taxonomy, typology, or classification in the widest sense, and then link them to outcomes, of course. Yeah. So great effort. Sounds interesting. I hope you talk about this in one of the upcoming seminars.
Yes. Well, we're working on a draft paper for the special issue, so there'll be something. Thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate your comments.
No, just social pressure is on. Talking about norms. Okay. Yeah, so great. Anyone else? Any comments?
Yeah, thanks for the feedback. We have Esteban Arribas Reyes. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. I know that you don't have a video, but you work with Professor Radelli. I didn't know if you wanted to introduce yourself or if you have any questions. And I don't mean to put you on the spot either. So just wanted to give you an opportunity to say hello. And maybe he went for coffee. Anybody else have any questions? Mattia? Good to see you.
Hi, good. Can you see me, hear me?
Yes.
My laptop is acting funny. Yeah, nice to see you all. No, I mean, it's interesting to be here, like see some new and old faces, and I don't think that there is much to discuss. It's always interesting to take stock and see who's doing what and how it is evolving. I'm really, really, really happy to hear that the lab is still providing internships and even more opportunities, because I had 1 or 2 students last year joining, because I am directing the internship module, so to speak, program for my department, and we had a few students interested in that. And yeah, I think that also we provided some reference letter to some of them. And I think it's a good deal for the students, for the institution, and for us. So we should actually find a way to advertise it a bit more, because I know it exists because Saba suggested it and I advertised it myself in my uni here, but it would be nice to put it. I don't know if yeah, you mentioned Twitter, because I don't have Twitter, so, but it would be nice to advertise it, because I think it is a great opportunity, and I'm sure that Angelo, that has been working on IGRI for ages, can at least say that it's a pleasant experience. Hopefully, at least.
Oh, that's a good point, Mattia, and thank you for raising that. So I'll definitely touch base with you and see what we can do to advertise the internship program a little bit more effectively, I guess.
Yeah, obviously there are some transaction costs, I believe, it's not like if it gets too big or too heterogeneous in terms of people and skill, it might get too complicated to manage, but still, it would be. I remember that someone mentioned already sort of 2 streams. So we already have a sort of theoretical stream and a more empirical data science stream, right?
Yeah. Well, we had the coding, testing the code book working group, which drew heavily on the Syracuse interns, including Angelo, who contributed quite a bit to that. But yeah, I think it's a good point that we may want to be more strategic in reaching out for specific internship opportunities based on what we're currently working on and where we need support. I think the computational side, I don't know. Christopher, Saba, do you want to contribute to this conversation?
Yeah, in fact, yeah, I have a question. To some extent, a question to Mattia, and to some extent, the admission precisely that. I think would be great if we could seek more particularly on the technical side, right? I mean, Saba has done so greatly, already introduced a couple of new interns, particularly from Syracuse. But for Mattia, a question to you: how do you incentivize them in a way, perhaps to share to all of us in a way who may be in a position, or some of us who are in a position to perhaps invite students to take this opportunity? Are you communicating it directly to the students? Are you linking this to a particular problem area or space that they feel the IG is suited to address, or is it linked to their own personal projects, or is it just kind of a community support or community service kind of activity? What's your, I don't know, is there any recipe, if you like?
Yeah.
You know what I mean,
I know that a lot of students are interested in, especially master students, but even undergrads are interested in, first of all, see what we do in real life as research. And they're interested in having that first-hand experience in research because they might consider research position, not necessarily graduate school, but as in like research position, but they really have no idea. Because most of them, they come and like, they read stuff, they summarize it, and that's pretty much it. So that is also like, like a peek into the world of like what research looks like. And it's not much different from what you would do in an international organization, an NGO, if you work for a company, if you do like a data or research job, more or less, that's the gist. Also, like some of them, they might be interested in specific questions regarding to the grammar. And third, the computational aspect today like is driving a lot. So, a lot of universities like in continental Europe, at least, and like in the UK are starting data science and public policy, computer science and public policy, whatever you want to call it, programs. And there's real demand. And you have some students that are a bit of ahead of a curve, and they already play a bit with something, but they want to have a more structured contribution. So yes, I think that, it's a first point of contact with the world of research, and it's good to see, and it's also like has the computational data science angle that people like.
Sounds good. Thank you for the elaboration. That's very helpful, Saba.
Yeah, thank you indeed, Mattia. That was really helpful. I think, and hello, it's nice to see you guys now, just not here to hear your voices. I guess one thing to follow on this question, I'd like to ask Angelo, though I'm sorry to put you on the spot, Angelo, as somebody that did an internship, is there something in particular? Is there a way that you think we could design the internship experience, internship topics, et cetera, to make it more meaningful, exciting, useful, productive, et cetera?
Yeah, I think just like, because I think what happened with us though, with me, and again, I can't speak for the my other two fellow interns who are doing it in the beginning, in the fall, and in the spring. Their names being Beza and Stephanie. But I remember we did have a conversation of like, I think with it being in the introductory phases, we kind of just like jumped in, and then we were just given like, okay, this is like how you code. But I think, yeah, there was a level of, in the beginning, it would be nice to be able for us to just take a topic we're interested in and then jump in from there, instead of like backwards going like, okay, this is just, most of the stuff we do is, organic farmers shall do X, Y, Z. But like, that's fine, right? That's kind of part of just like where we're at. But I think, yeah, there's a level of, in the future, it'd be nice for us, and again, it's worked out because I'm just thinking now, like, yeah, I used to really have this big interest in like child rights and child protection stuff. And I still do, but like, I just didn't have there was not really any methods for me to really like get into that.
Sorry, Angelo, one positive side is that like by now you might be one of the world expert in organic farming, honestly.
Yeah, that's true. Yes.
I don't know if it is something, but by now you're probably one of the most prepared expert in the world on organic farming.
Yeah, I don't mean to complain at all about how many times about organic farmers. It's almost like hopefully
it's a bit too specific. I take the point.
Yeah. I think hopefully people here understand this has been an ongoing joke, I think, in the community where like we have to read sentences about organic farmers all the time. But what's nice is, again, this is part of the research process, right? This is still again, new thing. And I think, yeah, that's why, I'm excited, hopefully with, where my hopefully research career grows, that I'll be able to take what I've gained. And I think, yeah, that's the whole point, is that I am very fortunate that I can just get obsessed out of anything, right? I just have a weird, odd, love of curiosity. You can throw me, I don't know, I know nothing about agent-based modeling, but every now and then I go and look at Chris's stuff and I'm like, what is this thing? And I still don't know what it is, but I'm really fortunate to have that. Where I have to realize, a lot of my peers, and I think about Stephanie and Beza, there was a little bit of a struggle where it was oh gosh, I really wish. And we did start doing IoT, like Internet of things later. But I think, yeah, in the beginning, it'd be nice. Hopefully, and this is a long ramble, but hopefully that helps. Just in the beginning, yeah, hopefully having a precise, being able to go into a topic. But it's hard because again, like it's just, this right now, it's still a new thing. IGRI, like the institutional grammar is still new and that has very specific focuses in specific places. So it will probably take a little bit for us to be able to have a super diverse like span of people in different places.
Christopher, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just a sense of responsiveness to Angelo. Yeah, I read you. I see. I read three stereotypes, I just call it profiles, out of what you mentioned there, right? On the one hand, I mean, there's the efforts that we have engaged in, I think last year, particularly with you as the first one, well, bad luck, deep end of the pool kind of interns, if you like, was of course that we are still working kind of on the on the tool itself, in a way, on the technique, in a way of coding, right? So it was, organic farming was a means to an end. You're turning it around and saying, well, we actually, the means to an end should be the analysis, let's say, of organic farming, IoT policy, or social policy, you name it, environmental modeling, who knows. So I think this is to part extent a concession to the nature of the program, how it develops, right? That we start centering out the tool first. And I think we'll probably have a branching out into a more empirical side where students can actually bring their own project or apply with their own project, if you like, to internships, and then get support in order to apply the method, of course, meaning partaking in initiatives and courses, as Asilata did, related to the IGE, how to use it, but not so much contribute to the method then anymore, or the technique, if you like, or tool, however you want to frame it in the context of your own methodology is, but rather just focus for their own research. But I think what we probably have more than, rather than interns, is probably will be more like master students or research students that actually really work on their own stuff under the mentorship of IGRI staff to some extent, perhaps in a one-to-one or one-to-many relationship, who knows. But right now we have, I guess, had more like a group setting of interns in the previous semesters. But in the future, it may just change. I think this is a growth process, and I think Saba has also mentioned that before, that it's really important that we shift to more empirical analysis and studies. So I think you should be the last batch having that experience if you don't want that experience. But we would hope for future students to still want that experience, so nevertheless they will join us coding whatever they get to code anyway. But thanks for the feedback, Angelo. It's really helpful, and thanks for your participation, because you're really. I am going slightly further than Mattia. Mattia said you're probably the world's most foremost expert on organic farming. I would say you're probably amongst the world experts on coding institutional statements in the first place, irrespective of domain. So thank you very much for your contribution. In any case.
If I can just add one thing, this is very specific to Saba, and sorry everyone, because this is very specific to Syracuse. But I really, when I look back at my education, loved it. But if I could just request a consideration, it's just that, like, I really wish I could have done like a thesis or something. I wish there was like a data analytics like thesis track or something. You have incredible people like Tina. There's a lot of like, there are people in this program that did like the Syracuse MPA and then got like a PhD later. Type of thing. Yeah, I won't name those people, but like it would be really cool if if that was an opportunity for students if they're interested. Because, and I know too, like I think you have multiple students I think working under you now too, who are MPA students who would be maybe interested in trying to go like a thesis route instead of capstone. But again, this is now like that's like this is administrative things that I can't, I don't know.
Well, to be honest, Angelo, it's funny because bridging your comments just now and Chris's comments, what I was actually thinking is that maybe that is a different sort of course that we offer at some point in the trajectory of our instruction. So, the training is the sort of very like get the foundations of coding and what the IG is. Maybe there's a complementary course that is just for students that want to do projects. And this other course is sort of walking through, it's like the research design and implementation, if you will, with advising and such. So that might be the compromise. But I definitely also, appreciate the other internship feedback that you gave, which is that, have it oriented around some discretized projects or discretized tasks as opposed to sort of general support but there could be different types of internships to accommodate the others still. But yeah.
Christopher? Christopher, your mic's off.
Yeah, the other way around. Yeah, whatever. The computer thing, it still escapes me. But is
that why you're switching to becoming a policy scholar?
Don't tell them.
From computer science.
Don't tell my boss. I think Angelo, your point is spot on. You were thinking about MPA, and that's a great example. I think we can think broader, because it doesn't need to be MPA students only, right? So, but it can of course also be from the computational side, data science side, whatever else comes. And I think it could also be extra institutional, right? So it doesn't need to be affiliated with Syracuse primarily, but it could be still on the umbrella of IGRI. So I think there's an opportunity for catchments that go really far beyond. But I think this thesis track is definitely a viable option, likely very attractive to Syracuse students, MPA students in Syracuse, at Syracuse specifically. Yeah. So no, I think that's probably the future ultimately. Having more of those initiatives and student relationships. Anyway, yeah. So a great point, Angelo and Saba. So.
Anybody else have any wishes for?
Can I make one comment?
Yeah.
Sorry,
Sure.
Juniper put in the chat reference David Carter and the organic farming, and I'm so glad she did, because we don't. Yes, David Carter, Chris Weibel, Sarah Chinayu, a former a master's student at IUPUI, David Carter and myself generated this data set for a NSF project that we were doing several years ago. And David and Sarah did the bulk of that coding for that original data set. So huge thanks to them for all their effort, because they have certainly laid the foundation for a lot of what we're doing. So thanks to them for sure. So thanks, Juniper, for calling out David, so we can acknowledge his tremendous hard work.
Yeah, organic farming rules will live on in perpetuity as a result of
For
they're
better,
such great
for-
examples, right? I put another little thing in the chat box if we have other space to chat and there aren't other topics that people have.
Thank you, Juniper.
Yeah, great comment. Is anybody else wanting to comment or have any ideas for upcoming activities that they want to see the IGRI pursue? Charlie, you turned off
Yeah,
your
well, I
mic.
just turned on my video. Sorry I was late, and it was really fun hearing the points that were just made when I came in. I'm a little not sure if I'm on track or what the dialogue's going on, but I figured I would make this point anyway. Building on Angelo's points, and of course there's different lengths of time, I guess, for lack of a better term, in terms of what people can devote to things. So like in an MPA, depending on the length of the time in a thesis, you might not have as much time to contribute collectively. But the thought occurred to me, so I study a lot of study about is around open source software, collective action, and collective action across sectors, for example. So it kind of builds on Chris's point about how it doesn't always, Chris made a point that was across organizational in some way a few minutes ago. And one of the things, that I learned from studying open source communities for a long, especially in the beginning of the era of open source software, was that that was driving people's interest in work was what Eric von Hippel and MIT calls user-centered need, or something like that, right? And so, Angela, that's kind of what you were saying a little bit, was I would like to be doing IG-related work, but be motivated by something I want to study, right? And the way I've always envisioned, or I've at least been thinking about the way I was hoping IGRI would continue to evolve, is that we've had these initiatives that we call IG Extract, the programming of a tool to pull out to build a database for enriched text of institutions, rules, norms, so on. IG Analytics, a tool that would actually produce metrics around taking that database that IG Extract would create. And then the IG Behave, kind of using that to understand behavior. And that's a really long-term vision to do that. This is going to take years and a lot of people's minds and a lot of collaboration. And so I guess I just, how we move towards something that embraces the user-centered need aspect, that people are going to come in, join IGRI for a time, maybe a master's student doing a thesis, maybe a PhD student from different disciplines, but how we actually create a collective infrastructure where we bring those types of people together who are chasing their own interests with different skill sets. So some might be coming from computer science like Chris, or other fields, data science, who want to contribute to the IG Extract effort or the IG Analytics effort. Others may want to use those tools to do some policy analysis work or something. But so that's what I'm trying to figure out, is how do we move forward as a community that takes advantage of the great minds, the young minds coming up with the skill sets that they're learning, to move this thing forward over the course of the next 10 to 20 years. So anyway, for what that's worth, it's kind of, I don't know if that was totally clear, but how we potentially take advantage of the network of universities and the great minds of the student bodies that are working on thesis or whatever program they're in. I don't know how exactly that fits into an internship type of thing, or if there was some way to do an IGRI. Well, we've already done it, I think, where we have an online class where different students from different institutions are plugging in, but then maybe building on what Saba said with that, initial introduction. And then the rest of it is, okay, how does that fit to your own interests, and how can you contribute back to the IGRI commons, for a lack of a better phrase? Anyway, I don't know if that was helpful, but those are thoughts.
Saba, Christopher, do you have any responses to Charlie?
Saba, go for it.
No, Christopher, go ahead. I always go. You always let me go first. You go first, and then I'll go.
Well, because you make the clever comment. So, but the only comment I can offer is that I had, the first impression was that the motivation, or the call for action, if you like, or reflection at least, is slightly bigger than this group, I believe, right? So this would be something that it could be ending on the mailing list to some extent, or in a strategic kind of session. But I think it's a great call for, and we are kind of diversely set up this today, having a lot of young adopters of the grammar and some more mature ones. So it's a good, great that they actually hear this message, right? That there is a need to think about furthering community, establishing and entrenching the community. So it's still in progress of building, I guess, and that's a central message to take away. In as far as the coordinative aspects are concerned, yeah. So that will require quite a bit of thinking, how one can manage this cross-organizational, because on the one hand, we are of course a very informal setting in a way in the IGRI, but as soon as we start offering, for instance, substantive research contributions or supervision contributions to, for example, other institutions, we suddenly need to tap into those formal frameworks, and we just see in how far we can either capitalize or kind of arrange ourselves with this so that it becomes actually feasible. So I think there will be a lot of endpoint negotiation necessary depending on the institution in how far they can support this. Charlie, you have a response, I sense.
Well, just one thought that I've never, I've got a truck that's going to make a lot of noise. One thought that I've never had before that kind of gets at the internship idea, to what extent has, let's say, public sector organizations, agencies that are interested in policy analysis shops, have interacted with IG at this point. But one of the beautiful things about the generic term for the open source community is commons-based peer production, right? And one of the reasons why I get so jazzed about it is because it's cross-organizational, it's cross-sectoral, it's cross political boundaries, and it's driven by user-centered need often. But so you could actually see potentially internships in public agencies that want to do policy analysis work using IG that would actually be contributing to the IG, the commons, the different tools we're trying to create and the analytic approaches and things. And I've never made that connection before. So I think that's kind of an interesting one to the internship idea. Anyway.
That is a really great thought, Charlie. Thank you for mentioning that because, Angelo actually facilitated a connection recently between Uta, myself, and his somebody at EPA, and now we've actually submitted a proposal to this contact to do an IG-based analysis of some total maximum daily load policies across states, and
That's
it would
fantastic.
be great. Yeah, so thanks to Angelo.
Way to go, Angelo.
Yes, definitely. And so if that comes through, that would be a great project to then, include an intern, like bringing an intern on, because then they get both. They get the experience learning, but also for a client on a specific project. And we ought to think about more opportunities like at this stage like that if this is successful. Thanks for mentioning that, Charlie. Even though we're in a way doing it, I didn't catch that there's an opportunity to link to the internship. The other thing, Charlie, I wanted to say too is, you obviously are the thought leader in IGRI around sort of orienting on on a lot of things, but among them the commons-based peer production concept and the orientation of the IGRI around this. And I'm wondering, are we at a place where we may actually evaluate, if you will, IGRI as a form of commons-based peer production to understand where we are, sort of how we're faring in on the different dimensions of what that is, and then maybe that can also help us guide our activities moving forward to sort of get better on certain dimensions. Do you think anything like that would be worthwhile at this stage?
Yeah, that's a really interesting thought. And as I guess we're getting into a little bit with the NSF program that started this, or project that started this network, but we will have a report due at the end of the summer, and that's probably what we should think about that as part of the report. It's a hard build. I mean, I've studied these things, but I haven't actually been involved on the ground with the open source kind of software development teams before, and that's what we've been trying to do with IG Extract. And it takes. So I'm not sure. I think we should do that, Saba. I'm not sure yet how successful we've been as a network. I think it's still a goal of IGRI over the longer term, in my mind. I hope, because I don't think we can build these things without a lot of collective action effort. Anyway, so I think this is a good idea, but maybe we take that, talk about that more offline.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Thank you, Charlie.
And Angelo raised his hand, but Juniper posed an interesting question in chat that I think needs to be addressed too. So Angelo, can you let Juniper go first, or is this directly relating to what Saba just said? Sorry. Okay, Juniper. And then
No,
Angelo.
that's all right. I mean, we're almost approaching our end of our time. Is that right? So please, Angelo, go for it.
Just a side comment, I guess, of just like, if I may just assert something of like, and this is a little bit of a pipe dream, but like, something I feel like I've been noticing though, for sure, in my time with the grammar, and something when we're talking about the communities we work with is just like, I would really like to see, if possible, engagement with folks that are in the arts and humanities, not just like in the sciences, just because like the folks who've been doing like literary theory and just like, comparative literature, all this stuff, like the way that they see language again, this goes into like, and it's tough to workshop this with Chris and Saba, and like, again, the cognitive grammar, like I swear I'm going to get into that, and like read into it. But like I said, like, within the past year since Lynn created this stuff, with, the philosophy of language was almost the basis of it. Like we've really, things have changed so much with the way that we understand language and stuff like that. And I think, we're missing out if we're not talking to the folks who stare at language every day. And I'm thankful, really, like, critical theory professor who, like, that it was able to like walk me through, like, okay, this is like this is semiotics, this is who Saussure is, this is Derrida, what happened there, this is Cavell, dropping names, right? That's a theory we'll do. But the point is that, like, for me at least, I start realizing the different branches and the way that, like, how you understand language, like, really affects the way that you understand policy. And again, we have, like, there's a legal interpretation, but I do think, like, the literary theory stuff, like, that stuff is starting to, like, I think there are a lot of connections that we could make. But again, that's a little bit of a reach, and we'd have to, I don't know, there's a lot of experimentation. That's what, that's in my mind, like, a lot of experimentation I have to do. And I've been testing it out. Like, I'm thankful I have, like, literary theory professors that I, throw ideas at and go, like, hey, like, so I do this thing called the grammar, and usually I can convince them to, like, listen to me. But, like, at the end of the day, like, I don't know, I just want to try to point out that, like, I think sometimes we think through, like, okay, the scientists are going, the anthropologists, sociologists are going to be the ones who look at informal rules and informal things. And I'm just like, our friends in the arts and humanities, like, have been doing that for years too. And so it's like, we might as well, like, see if we can chat with them and reach out and figure out ways. So that's just a side thing.
Yeah, Angela, that is such a great point. Thank you for raising that. I mean, I think we definitely would benefit from having somebody in linguistics in the community, linguistics scholars represented in this community, because absolutely, I mean, the philosophy of language is very foundational to what we're doing, and it would be great to sort of have that perspective represented here from different disciplines, actually, not just philosophy per se.
Yeah, Angelo, you're speaking the words I like here, because I've had this dumb question that I'm almost like afraid to ask because it's like so obvious, which is, what do legal scholars, people who focus on the formation and writing of laws, say? Because sometimes I say this to Uta all the time when we meet, are we just deconstructing legal terminology that already has a constructed logic?
Right.
That is very well understood within those, common law heritages that go way back. And are we just kind of like, what do people who study the writing, the formation of actual legal documents say about grammar? I would love to have somebody speak to that because, to Angela's point, other people study the way that language, is constructed, but also influences understanding and behavior. Has that been done and I just missed it?
Can I jump on this? I don't do legal studies, but I work with people that is in between law, economics, and and policy. So for instance, like, what we do is we use a lot the condition element when it comes to the grammar, because in the optimal contract theory, which is between law and economics, the concept of contingency is really important. So whether a provision takes into consideration different states of the nature, and then you have the difference between events, the difference between action, and so on, is really interesting. But I mean, from what I've come across, I might be wrong, but it looks like that legal studies, they lack a bit this framework that is the grammar. So they have been trying to count the number of types of provision. They have been trying to come up with ways to measure argument, like to see arguments and so on. But my impression, at least, but I might be wrong, is that they kind of lack this big framework that the grammar is.
And I can add to that because I work with legal scholars at the international level. And so some of the things that I've encountered in the coding of formal rules at the international level are, there's connections there that legal scholars are not necessarily aware of. And that gets highlighted, or it kind of comes to the fore because of the rigorousness of the way that the institutional grammar tool allows you to analyze texts. And so I've often raised questions about disconnects within certain policies that my colleague didn't have an answer for because he wasn't even aware that there was a disconnect. So I guess that's just something that I'd like to share. So it's a different way, legal analysis is a different way of looking at the rules. It's not necessarily going into as much detail as the grammar does.
Right. I mean, I was more talking about the structure of laws, like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, why they are structured the way that they are probably comes from English common law, I would imagine. And what that means for our work, I guess, is kind of what I'm interested in.
Mm-hmm.
Angelo, sorry, I cut you off.
No, you're good. I think Chris can go next. I think my comment is moot.
I'm not sure if of any help or consideration, but while actually looking at like the kind of methodological guidelines for coding institutional statements, we reviewed a bit the different standards that exist. I think, what is it called? The one is the green book for writing law. I forgot, they have a specific blue book, I think it was actually for you know, devising law in the common law theme setting, but there are other rules, for example, in the regulation in the European setting. So I think we'll probably not get around consulting you know, legal expertise from the corresponding legal traditions, being it the common law or civil law perspectives and so on. I think, but and that's precisely to the point of Mattia, that the grammar is more general, right? It's a bit more general, but it has a certain bias, and I think that's something that the IG2 hopefully tries to alleviate, to overstates structure over meaning. And that's probably what you referenced in Juniper, when I heard you correctly. You know, don't we just reconstruct in a weird and arbitrarily you know, reductionist way, complex legal constructs that are expressed as a compound unit, right? That should not be deconstructed in the very same way. But I think this is really where we need to think that is subject to some extent the empirical evaluation, but also a conceptual mapping. I mean, you know, the idea is that in IG2 we want to move away a bit from structure as well, more to semantics, by having a more systematic labeling exercises. And I can see there kind of a domain, or let's say tradition-specific annotation convention that would be superimposed on statements or particular components if, for example, a particular term signals a particular meaning, right? So, for example, immediately in a certain legal context means without any, you know, irresponsible delay or whatever else, right? There are different traditions, for example, in German law that is very specific about this term. But then we could, you know, perform those annotations, but we probably still, no, we definitely would still need to have the legal expertise from a particular domain. But I think the grammar is slightly too generic and too general to accommodate those specific aspects. So that was reflection one. Reflection two, Ute, what is it now? Probably 1-ish years ago, we had a legal informatics scholar, I guess, joining us for some time, right? So, and reviewing some of the coding, and they have some of the intuitions. And every time we discussed, the result was, it depends on the kind of perspective you take, right? So there was always a hesitation to commit, to say, and that went as far as to say, one shouldn't even commit whether a statement is regulative or constitutive in kind. So that would be the more extreme case. But even what the you know, effect of a particular statement would be, because it depends inherently on the pragmatics in which it is evaluated, right? The particular case in which violation or compliance is effectively assessed, and only then the statement can show its actual, you know, value, purpose, and of course effect as well. So there was always this kind of microscopic perspective and very instance-centric interpretation that I've felt, at least in this process, without being a legal scholar at all myself. I was just seeing this distance, whereas the grammar is really made for generalizing, right? So for having large scale analysis, scaling up and seeing the big picture, I guess. But in this, by necessity, having such a coarse instrument, we're necessarily losing some of the fine-grained aspect. So I think there's a lot of homework to be done. But your observations resonate quite well. Yeah, you're not alone with this, I believe.
Well, we are overtime actually now.
I take the blame.
No worries, no worries. It's nobody, just an observation. So I just wanted to thank everybody for their feedback and contributions, and hope to see you in February for our next formal research seminar. And yeah, if you have any thoughts that you weren't able to share this time, please feel free to email us, any one of us, and we certainly appreciate all your thoughts and contributions and support, and hope we'll do better this year.
Thank you. It was really great to see you all.
Thank you. Happy New Year, everybody.
Yes. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.